recording now.
Is everyone able to see the screen though? Sorry.
Yes, they should be.
Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to chapter 4 and 5 of Reform or Revolution by Rosa Luxemburg. We'll be going over a interview of each or introduction to each chapter and then go into some quotes that we have or highlighted sections of the chapter. Um, First, the overview, or at least what I saw in chapter 4, was that Rosa Luxemburg discussed the role of the state, in particular, like parliament, oh my goodness, parliamentarians, just the role of,
I think I can say parliamentarism,
yes,
like a
um,
parliament.
yes, the parliament, the role of the parliament, specifically in like capitalist societies and how it's organized, how it benefits the interest of like the ruling classes and whatnot, um, as well as like the state will, how the state enacts types of uh, different types of bills or whatnot to interest of the capitalist themselves. The first quote that I had was on page 480 in the book or page 33 on the PDF. As soon as democracy shows the tendency to negate its class character and become transformed into the instrument of the real interest of the population, the democratic forms of are sacrificed by the bourgeoisie and by the state representatives. So can you guys think of any like modern examples or policies that you can think of that are negated? Or just have any thoughts on this quote?
Could you tell us the meaning of it?
So, how I see it, modern day, like the stripping of welfare or like just um, neoliberal policies, really. You know, as the as she says, um, as the instrument of as the interests of the population are used in democratic forms, the bourgeoisie is going to slowly strip those interests away um, using the state. So I looked at it as like most neoliberal policies. But does anyone have like some specific examples that they want to go over?
I I do, and I think that given how propagandized everyone is, uh, neoliberal policies and cutting off welfare might not be the best example because many people are convinced that they are bad for the country as a whole. But I remember there was a ballot initiative about weed. I don't remember which state it was, but it passed, and after that. Politicians they try to uh, go against it, and I think they ended up declaring the ballot initiative unconstitutional.
Uh,
Like you see the clear example of people as a collective trying to make a single decision, and once that threatens the interest of the ruling class, they will do away with democracy.
Yeah, no, that's a really good example. Like if you think of in Kansas, we had the initiative of abortion rights, and it was overwhelmingly support of protecting abortion rights. But you can see even to this day, there's um, judges and other politicians trying to continually to strip those abortion rights away. I think even Florida had one where they had a ballot initiative of raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour that politicians got all up in arms over and tried to strip even, the $15 away. So my next question is, if the bourgeoisie continually strips these democratic forms of the state, should we still participate in the parliament politics?
Well, if they strip the democratic form of it, then I mean, wouldn't that mean that the people, like, they would get less and less of a say within politics if that were the case? So, I mean, it would get harder, it would get more and more difficult to operate within the system if that were to be the case, which I mean is honestly the case.
Yeah, I mean, like, if you think of the reading in chapter 4, she talks about, like, they'll give, the state will give every now and then some, like, policies, but then we'll take them away after a certain amount of years. So, like, think of Obamacare. We had that for several, or even like Medicare. We're given that as an incentive for a couple years, but then the state is going to slowly dwindle that away. Um, is this something that we should continually participating in, trying to get rights through the state or through politics?
I don't think that that really necessarily works, but I think there's still value in participating it. And there's also different forms of participation, right? For example, over the summer, I actually went with the Women League of Voters, and I hand wrote cards like to individual voters, like, "Hey, my name's Justin. This is why I don't. This is why I think you should vote for this amendment, right, or vote against the amendment." Um, and something like that is good, right? Because if you're going out and that's one, you're networking with other people, and because that's where, even though as communists and socialists, we perhaps realize that that's not going to work. The masses of people, that's where they're mentally at right now, right? And you can't just walk like, oh, well, you need to just, give up and go straight to a revolution. Like, people have to come to their own conclusion, right? So that's how we participate in these things. It's not necessarily because we want to get a politician elected, but because we want to look around at the other volunteers and the other people actually doing the work and trying to persuade them of the values of socialism. And then when when electoralism inevitably fails, as Luxemburg makes the argument for, right? Then when it inevitably fails, we're right there, and they trust us because we worked with them and can be like, look, I don't mean to say I told you so, but told you so. Like, would you like to try something different? That's the value I see in it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think even in chapter 5, we'll go over it again soon. That there's still value in participating in it for sure. It's while it's limited, there is still value. I think we'll go on to the next slide.
Wait. I want to highlight something. So the question is about if the bourgeoisie will continue to strip the democratic form of the state. And I think that the form, it has to be democratic to some extent, but as a function, it doesn't need to work. We can vote for police chiefs and district attorneys, and on its own, that's nice. But like, your options are severely limited. And I remember there was a sort of manual about guerrilla warfare that was produced for the state. And one of the important things that is my takeaway from it is that they need to introduce institutionalized avenues for expressing discontent, so that like youth league, women's unions, and for all the different interest groups. so that when people have things to complain about, they go there instead of to the communists. So it has to be democratic in form, but not in function.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like you're saying that the current system there's a veneer of democracy. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so it's like the illusion of the
Mhm.
democratic form. Yeah. Okay, I
That was
see what you're saying.
that was a study maybe a year or two ago, and they were looking at correlation between public opinion and
Policies that are
financial opinion
yeah.
and the policies that get implemented. And there is basically zero correlation between public opinion and what policies get implemented.
Yeah, no, I mean the state is definitely another form of the bourgeoisie.
Oh, one more real example from current times I just thought of was in everyone aware of what's going on in Atlanta with they call it the cop
Ah,
city.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
there was leaked emails, right? From the police and like the attorney for the police, I believe, and like the district attorney and stuff. And they basically said, and it was, they accidentally leaked this email, so it was meant to be like an internal communication. But they basically said, like, yeah, the law says that if someone, comes up with like a challenge, or it was like some kind of legal challenge, right? That we have to halt the construction of this facility until the legal challenge is resolved in court. But we're just going to ignore that and go ahead with it anyway. So like, that's just an example of behind the scenes, like, the people are very clearly opposed to this thing, right? They're out there protesting, as well as some people are trying to work through the bourgeois system of law and, follow all the rules and go through the bureaucracy and all that. And even when that happens, it's like she says here, when they start to try to turn it into an instrument of the real interests of the masses, then those democratic forms go out the window. And that's literally evidence in an email that got leaked.
Yeah.
There's probably hundreds of examples that we could come up with. But yeah, we'll go on to the
Okay.
next.
Okay.
Well,
Can we pause for just a second, just for like
Yes.
30 seconds? Recording now.
Okay. I put this one up, so I'll read it. So this is a quote that I got, and I had some questions about it, right? So Luxemburg says the present state is, first of all, an organization of the ruling class. It assumes functions favoring social development specifically because, and in the measure that, these interests and social developments coincide in a general fashion with the interests of the dominant class. Labor legislation is enacted as much in the immediate interest of the capitalist class as in the interest of society in general. I forgot to write the other question I wanted to ask, but the first one I wanted to ask was, okay, so Luxemburg says here that the state assumes functions for social development because they coincide with the interests of the ruling class, and she cites labor legislation as an example of that, right? But if we all think, like, what is the one thing that every business, large or small, fears is labor legislation. So I guess I want to ask is, like, how can it, even if the individual capitalists hate, I don't know, let's say like OSHA regulations, right? How can OSHA regulations benefit them collectively as a class? And yeah, that's my question. First one.
Sometimes I usually think I'm not thinking of OSHA regulations, but like wages
Yeah.
as a class interest. Even sometimes uh, other capitalists benefit from increased wage to their workers. So, increased consumption of their products go up, increased, buying of goods, commodities, such as that, benefits the capitalist class at some form. While sure they have to pay out some more towards their workers, there's more, um, you know, going around for the working class to more flexibility outside of, rent and bills and utilities and stuff like that for them to buy commodities.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It creates aggregate demand. The other one I wanted to draw people's attention to is Social Security, right? Like, look at the name Social Security, right? Like, they put the word security in there, which kind of gives you a hint, right? So that's a bare minimum income that, like, elderly people, disabled people get. And you might, and obviously, that comes out of payroll taxes, which are paid in part by the worker and in part by the employer, right? So even though you don't see it, your employer is paying part of those as well, assuming you're a W-2 worker. And so they would obviously individually love to cut that cost, right? Because that would mean more profits for them. But if you think of it, they call it like a revolution insurance. It's a form of security against people being so destitute that they lose everything they have, and then they really nothing holding them back from being more revolutionary, right?
No, that is a great example. Yeah.
And just more in general, they need to maintain peace instead of waging an active class war, because like they are underpowered. I mean, like in numbers. So they have to give away these benefits so that people would keep working, and like just so they are not gonna revolt.
Yeah, so I guess in summary, since we went over some examples, right, the general idea is like, even as individual capitalists, a lot of these rules and regulations and laws and stuff, whether they govern like workplace safety or taxes or wages, as individual capitalists, it's very harmful to their interests. But the state comes in like, no, we got to have these rules for the stability of the system as a whole. I think that's what she's trying to get at here.
Yeah. Did you have another question along with this, Justin?
Yes, yeah. The second one says, given Luxemburg's description of the state as quote an organization of the ruling class unquote, how this is an interesting one. How would the function of the state differ under socialism? By socialism, we mean where the ruling class is no longer the bourgeoisie, but has been replaced by the proletariat, right? So, yeah, what do people think about that?
I mean, some obvious examples is like that we saw like with poverty alleviation programs from China, Cuba, Soviet, Union. They had uh, guaranteed healthcare, guaranteed, education, stuff like that. Some of the just obvious, like some things that just seem so basic, you know. Then they also have, other housing guaranteed, stuff like that. But the function would more benefit the masses more than trying to keep the markets alive, you know.
Yes. Perfect contemporary example in the news right now is that explosion in East Palestine, Ohio, with the I don't forget what the chemical was called, right? Some kind of poisonous shit.
Vinyl chlorine.
Vinyl
Yeah,
chlorine. It sounds like I wouldn't want to drink or inhale it.
Very, very dangerous.
Yes. And so I think in a proletarian state, right, a state where the ruling class is the working class, no one's been arrested by this. There's been no arrests of CEOs. There's been no arrests of safety inspectors. There's been no punishment or anything. And what is it? The railroad company has been pretty much allowed to do whatever the hell they want. Now I think about and that's because the railroad company is a bourgeois company that is, a private interest, and the state represents that interest, right? But if we lived in a proletarian state, I'd like to imagine maybe our justice system would, immediately arrest the CEO of the railroad company. Would fine this company, would arrest the leadership of the company and everyone involved with this failure of safety, right? Because that's what they actually do in China. In America, we had poisoned baby formula, and nobody went to jail over it, even though little babies literally died from it, right? In China, when they had a infant formula factory that had like poisonous formula because of some kind of malfunction in the factory or something, they literally executed the CEO of that company, and they also executed the factory owner. So that, to me, that tells you the difference in the priorities of the state.
No, definitely. I mean, you can see that happening in just even natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina, even now, and the earthquakes. There were flaws within the infrastructure in these cities that are due to the regulatory regulations being, bare minimum for these for these cities to withstand natural disasters. And with the increase of climate change and the occurrence of these natural disasters, we're going to see these, China and these socialist states benefit or have the well-being of their civilians more than here in the West.
Yep. Or look at how, for example, the army in Cuba after a hurricane, they mobilized, but what did they mobilize to do? They mobilized to rescue people from the water, the flooding. They literally, soldiers will help reconstruct people's homes.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that our National Guard does do some disaster relief, but like, what's their primary function is not that. Like, the primary function is to protect property and shoot looters. That's literally what they do after every natural disaster, right? And so that's another example. If our state with more of a working class orientation, I could not fathom American soldiers reconstructing someone's house after a hurricane. I could never see that happening, but it happens in Cuba.
I want to ask a question. Like, why is that city in Ohio called East Palestine?
That's a good question. I couldn't tell you.
There's a lot of cities in the United States named after European cities. I think there's like a Rome, Texas. Um, there's a whole bunch of those scenarios. So I really couldn't tell you.
I heard that it's pronounced Palestine instead of Palestine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I just sorry about that. But yeah, I don't. I was just wondering about that. Like, why is the city called like Palestine or yeah?
Yeah, Palestine, I think is how it's pronounced. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of those examples here in the US.
Yeah.
Right.
Many of them are named by immigrants who came here from that place.
Yeah, that's true.
I remember I was doing some research for college, and I came across this one town, and I looked into it, and that was the case. German settlers named it after their hometown, where they came from en masse.
It's a weird one. There's a Cuba, Kansas, but it's all German settlers. It's kind of interesting. I don't know why it's that way, but for interest of time, we should move on to the next
Yeah, I was
slide.
gonna say.
Yeah.
I did not put this one up, but I can read
Yeah,
it.
I put this one up. I just thought it was really witty and stuff because so she says Fourier's scheme of changing by means of a system of phalansteries the water of all the seas into tasty lemonade was surely a fantastic idea. But Bernstein proposing to change the sea of capitalist bitterness into a sea of socialist sweetness by progressively pouring bottles of social reformist lemonade into it presents an idea that is merely more insipid but no less fantastic. I just thought that was funny, and that was a really
Yeah,
good summary of her overall argument, I think.
No, I thought it was she's kind of funny. It's when you're reading like this political theory, there's some witty lines in there like this that kind of make you chuckle.
Oh yeah, Lenin was the king of that.
Yeah, Lenin's got some good ones. I'm sure we'll
Hates
get into that.
Kautsky.
Yeah. I don't think we really have too much on this that we haven't
Yeah.
covered already, so we'll move on. So chapter 5, a quick little overview. Luxemburg was covering just how reformists aren't really interested in taking over the power of the state. Rather, they want to create like short-term improvements, like we were talking about, like labor protection laws with the rights of workers and stuff like that. But they want to really do it within the confines of the parliament or the limitations of the capitalist state. So that was, you know, something that I really noticed in chapter 5.
Yeah. Oh
This
yeah, I threw this one up. Says the relations between capitalist property and capitalist state develop in entirely opposite directions, so that the daily practical activity of the present social democracy loses, in the last analysis, all connection with work for socialism. From the viewpoint of a movement for socialism, the trade union struggle and our parliamentary practice are vastly important insofar as they make socialistic the awareness and the consciousness of the proletariat and help to organize it as a class. But once they are considered as instruments of the direct socialization of capitalist economy, they lose out not only on their usual effectiveness, but also cease being means of preparing the working class for the conquest of power, right? So I guess I wanted to ask, like, as far as where she talks about being important insofar as it raises consciousness, what does that look like in practice?
Actually coming together to like form a union to actually represent your class interests, like a bunch of people coming together and then like recognizing what their class interest is.
Yes. I would also say it can look like, well, what we're doing right now, right? A bunch of working people and students getting
Yeah.
together and raising awareness. Um,
I think a good example right now is like the Starbucks unions, right? Like
uh-huh.
they've garnished a really large audience online on Twitter and whatnot, and it's bringing more awareness to the cause, I guess, of unionization, um, but also just further developing their like class conscious viewpoints.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would agree with that 100%. Second question I got here is I would say, all right, so given that there is some value in participating in the parliamentary process and the trade unionism and all that, as she identifies here, I would ask, where do we draw a line? Like, when does, like, what separates a class consciousness raising trade unionism or parliamentarism from just like revisionist collaboration with the state?
This is something that I struggle with personally, so I don't know where the line should really be drawn. I don't know if anyone has a really good answer for that, but I mean,
I
I
think
think that
I could maybe like, okay, so there's like two. You said there's you can maybe distinguish between the two, like trying to participate in parliament and then just opportunism. I mean, I don't know if you guys know, but there's sort of like a fake psyop movement called like MAGA communists, and
Oh
they
God.
like they have gotten together under like Jackson Hinkle, this person called Jackson Hinkle and Haas, and like they've gotten together under the idea that they're going to try and get like particularly like the MAGA people to become like class consciousness and revolutionary but like in just particular, just the MAGA people. So they only single out this one movement, which is known for being like fake populist reactionary, but then they don't want to look at everything else, and they call everything that they don't agree with like leftist, like soy boy liberal. And that, I think that's a good example of like right opportunism within like the socialist area, like in particular Jackson Hinkle has.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think the word for that is tailism, where you're like trying to tail the most reactionary elements of a group, whether it be
Yeah.
the working class. Yeah.
Yeah, that is what it is.
Yeah, that's one example of that can be a line of separation. I was thinking more like, all right, so I'm 32, so I've like been lived through many election cycles and all that, and I noticed a common theme, right? And the common theme is during the build up to the election, they get this campaign going. They mobilize a lot of people, like regular working class people, as volunteers. Bernie Sanders did this, for example, and that's good. Like, I agree that mobilization is good. But what happens is they do the election and then they demobilize, right? Here in Kansas, I think of the whole abortion amendment. In which case we won that one, right? I think it was they worded it confusingly, but we defeated it and abortion was preserved in Kansas, right? Which is good. I'm not saying that that's not good, but what I am criticizing is everyone's all right. We won. Well, let's celebrate for a night and then pack up our bags and go home and back to work like normal. Like nothing more to see here. In my opinion, that attitude of whether you want to demobilize or you want to use this election or this trade union organizing or whatever the case, right, as a staging point to continue organizing and continue escalating, right? Because even though we defeated that amendment, women's rights, in particular the right to abortion, is still under threat. Like, the right just didn't give up and like, oh, drats, I guess we just, close up shop. Like, no, they're always scheming, right? And so, and in my opinion, that would be because those efforts were focused more on collaborationism, is because they demobilized everyone. Whereas a revolutionary effort of raising consciousness would be like, nah, we got to continue organizing for this, continue raising awareness, and not like let the momentum go, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I think we were having that discussion briefly in the chats. Obviously, people watching the videos can't read our chats now, but it's if you don't continue the mobilization of these single topic issues, it just falls flat on its face. These movements just, I mean, sure, they get one issue done, but there is many more that continue, the momentum. But yeah, I think that's some really good examples there. Does anyone have anything else? This one. If not, we can move on.
Yeah, we can move to the next one. Okay. All right, yeah, so this is kind of related to the last one, I guess, but she says, it is not true that socialism will arise automatically from the daily struggle of the working class. Socialism will be the consequence of 1, the growing contradictions of capitalist economy, and 2, of the comprehension by the working class of the unavoidability of the suppression of these contradictions through a social transformation, right? And so I guess we talked about it a little bit on the last slide, but I wanted to ask people, like, what is the correct way to go about getting the working class to comprehend this, right? Like, how do you raise that consciousness? What's effective?
Organizing. And I mean, it's not like it's gonna take a while. It's not gonna be okay, let's just get together and then immediately everyone's just gonna like agree with us. It has to be like a daily struggle. Like you continuous class struggle.
Yes, I agree that organizing is but I guess there's something I'm thinking of within organizing that educates workers. That's in my opinion, it's one of the most crucial topics that a working class person needs to realize to raise their consciousness. It's the fact that go ahead. Oh, was that an echo?
Wait, say what you're gonna say.
Oh no, I was saying, so I think the way to go about getting people to comprehend this, which is you said organizing is one method, but getting people to realize that that their interests as a worker and the interests of their employer, like it doesn't matter how friendly the company is, it doesn't matter, what kind of PR or DEI initiatives or whatever they have, or how well they pay you, like getting people to realize that their interests and their employer's interests are fundamentally mutually exclusive. In my opinion, that is the way to go about getting the correct way to get people to comprehend what she's talking about here.
Yeah, and that comes from just messaging from our side. It comes from being able to. I think we have to use all different forms of messaging, of course, of news media, TikToks, memes, literally everything. Um, being able to bring the being able to help people understand the contradictions of the worker and the relations between the worker and the capital owners, or just the your worker and the manager itself is just comes from messaging, being able to talk to people um, on the floor of your workplace and stuff like that. It takes time, but uh, it needs to be done through propaganda and whatnot.
Yeah, and
I was
I
also,
think. Oh, go
sorry.
ahead. No, go
No,
ahead.
I was just gonna say the whole deprogramming of Red Scare propaganda, because even just educating people on what socialism is, I feel like I didn't even understand fully what it was until just a few years ago, uh, honestly. But yeah, and that's what I see with peers around here as well.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I want to give an example from my own work, right? We work for this company, and they subcontracted us out to Walmart, right, to be data engineers, so computer programming stuff. And they were the company that subcontracted us out made us all these promises, like, oh yeah, they'll hire you full time, and like they're gonna treat you guys well, and this, that, and the other thing. And a lot of people were I was very frustrated, like as I got this job last summer, because a lot of people were like, they had the wool pulled over their eyes. But what ended up happening was a lot of these promises they made fell through. I had one coworker, and she moved all the way from Washington to Arkansas, under the promise in the from the company that she would have a transition from a contract work into a full-time job, and it ends up Walmart just laid us all off. There's nothing we can do about it, right? And at that point, people were very disillusioned. And then sometimes I think it can just be like, just waiting for something like that to inevitably happen. And you can come up and be like, hey, this really does suck. Why do you think this happened this way? And this way, I've been able to talk to my coworkers who've been extremely sympathetic. That's just one example from my own life that I think could give people an idea.
I think we can move on to the next quote here.
Yeah. We may say that the theory of revisionism occupies an immediate place between two extremes. Revisionism does not expect to see the contradictions of capitalism mature. It does not propose to suppress these contradictions through a revolutionary transformation. It wants to lessen, to attenuate the capitalist contradictions, so that the antagonism existing between production and exchange is to be mollified by the cessation of crises and the formation of capitalist combines. The antagonism between capital and labor is to be adjusted by bettering the situation of the workers and by the conservation of the middle class. And the contradiction between the class, state, and society is to be liquidated through increased state control and the progress of democracy. So, I wanted to ask, like, how do we see that taking play today?
I mean, there's plenty of different actions that we can see today, like the strengthening or the fight for 15, or I think is what it's called, just the 15-hour minimum wage, that just lessens, the blow. Like she's talking about, it wants to lessen the capital contradictions there. There's also debt, that we were talking about. Credit cards is really something that's been in big play recently. Loans, mortgages, stuff like that, allowing people to buy cars and houses or whatnot. But I don't want to take over all. Anyone has other examples, feel free to chime in.
I don't really think that there is really that many like examples of this today, because like the whole like course since like Ronald Reagan and like the rise of neoliberalism is like the opposite of this. It's like taking away like the like it's taking this away. It's taking away like the it's like social programs and other types of things like this. So I don't know if it's like this, but it's different in character.
Let me give the example I was thinking of, right, is obviously climate change and global warming is a very catastrophic thing that, people are waking up to very quickly, right, as a bad thing. And so what do some of the Democrats do include, the self-proclaimed socialists of the squad? What do? They back things like, I don't know, like, electric vehicle tax credits for the environment. And that's how we'll fight climate change and carbon emissions, is by encouraging people to buy electric cars through the tax code. And I would say that's like a revisionist solution, right? Because it's trying to solve it's exactly like she says here, to lessen and attenuate these contradictions by by toning down the antagonism between production and exchange. Literally, instead of, I don't know, telling businesses like, hey, you have to stop polluting, giving people fines and arresting them, and actually doing something, they try to like work within the market or whatever. That was one example I was thinking about.
I've been
Yeah,
to
you're
this trade
absolutely.
show.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I've been to this trade show earlier this week, and there was a company who was sponsoring this new bill that was passed recently in the state of Washington, and it's basically about giving tax credits for using electric forklifts, and you can make like $500 to $1,000 in each quarter if you are using and recharging your electric forklifts. And they are gonna sell these I don't know what they are called to all companies, and that's so much money and everything, and like $500 each quarter, like that's nothing.
Right.
If you are aware of just how much we spend, that doesn't make a difference. And besides, the owner is trying to sell the company, so he's not gonna upgrade anything. like same with the car that they gave to us. They keep repairing it instead of buying something new because they are gonna sell the whole company and the car gonna put it.
Yeah, I think that's another good example. Yeah, so it's just like, I guess in general, it's like all the solutions that they propose don't actually challenge anything fundamentally about capitalism, right? It's trying to work within the rules of the system to, you know, and I don't like conflict. I want to stay away from that. Why don't we all just play nice with each other? Oh yeah, this was a good one. So Bernstein's theory does not see these manifestations of contemporary economic life as they appear in their organic relationship with the whole of capitalist development, with the complete economic mechanism of capitalism. His theory pulls these details out of their living economic context. It treats them as disjecta membra, or separate parts of a lifeless machine, right? So this is kind of a what error is Bernstein making here, like in broad terms? Anyone want to guess?
He's looking at things on its own instead of part of as a system that dialectically interacts with other parts of the system.
That's right. You said the magic word. He's not thinking about it dialectically, right? That's exactly it, Danny. Because what is dialectics, right? It's like Danny said. It's instead of thinking about things in isolation, you're thinking about how everything is connected and related, right? I just think it's important to point this out because there's some people, oh, why do we need dialectics? This is just abstract philosophy, but look, like in Bernstein's case, he's not thinking dialectically, and because he's not thinking about things dialectically, as she points out right here, he makes all kind of errors that are addressed throughout this entire book, right? I just think it's important because this shows the importance of thinking about things correctly. In the unhindered advance of capitalist production lurks the threat. Oh, yeah, Danny, you'll like this one. Lurks the threat to capitalism that is much greater than crises. It is the threat of the constant fall of the rate of profit, resulting not only from the contradiction between production and exchange, but from the growth of the productivity of labor itself. The fall in the rate of profit has the extremely dangerous tendency of rendering impossible any enterprise for small and middle-sized capitals. It thus limits the formation and therefore the extension of placements of capital, right? I've thought we should discuss this point because a lot of people might not understand rate of profit and how that works. That's in volume 3. Does anyone want to try and take a shot at it?
Yeah. The sort of concept of the falling rate of profit is like, as it is that production advances, you're going more and more things are going to be made. So then, I mean, okay, so there's a lot of there's a lot of parts to it. I think I can explain it. Can someone else try and explain it? Or
I can try.
okay.
There's no one else volunteering.
Go ahead, Danny.
So, since companies use so much more machines and everything, they a larger part of their revenue and overall cost has to be dedicated to those machines, or not only machines, but things that they buy not on the labor market, but on the market of goods and services. So the company is going to become more interconnected with the economy as a whole. Instead of most of the value being produced at one single place, is produced throughout the country, throughout the globe. And this means that the a larger part of the income has to go towards these expenses. And so the rate of value added, the value that's being created at a single workstation is going to become lower. And value added consists of two things: the cost of wages, or well, compensation for workers, and profit. And because like, so they are, both of these are supposed to get smaller in proportion relative to income and cost. And that means that the rate of value added is going to get lower, and the rate of profit will also get lower. It doesn't mean that nominal wages are going to get smaller, just that they make up a smaller part of the overall expenses. And capitalists make investments to make profit. But because the rate of profit is falling, it's going to get more difficult. And people are going to need a lot more capital to even get a business started these days than they needed, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And this is a tendency that will, it just keeps getting more like this. And so profits are going to depend a lot more on the market instead of on how much they can exploit a single worker or the workers that they employ. Because the expenses and the income, they depend a lot more on the market of goods and services than on the market of labor. And as I try to go towards, sorry, I'm a bit rambling. But so capitalists, they don't really care about how much value the company creates. All they care about is how much profit they can take out of the company. And it's gonna get less profitable to make more investments and take out money. So like, this is gonna fuel them towards suppressing wages and economic warfare with other capitalists and other countries trying to expand markets and just destroy competition. I think that's it.
I think
I don't know if
I mean, essentially, like what it describes, the fall of the rate of profit is that as it is that the capitalist system progresses, the amount of like value or the amount of like profit that the capitalist is able to extract through exploitation from the worker will be less and less due to a constant sort of like the value that they're able to extract will become less and less, which will eventually lead to a crisis in the system. So it's like
I wanna point out two things, which is that they can expect less of what they invest, but the rate of profit to the rate of wages, like that, that's unrelated to this. Because you can have a company that has a 10% profit rate, and they are going to spend 60% on wages, or you can have a company that has a 10% profit rate and they spend 5% on wages. because they have that much more capital.
So when it is I say that it describes like the rate, how it is that over time the amount that they're able to extract will become less and less. Are you saying that is
No, this is not about capitalists as a class, but as individuals.
individuals? But as individuals, what is it that you mean by that?
I think it would be important to introduce the term rate of exploitation, by which I refer to the rate of profit relative to the rate of wages. So if I get paid $1 and the owner makes $1, that means that 50% of the market value created is exploited. And this rate of exploitation is going to be different throughout the economy. But the rate of profit is going to be similar somewhat.
So you're saying that how it is that I describe it can be used to describe it on an individual level, but can't be used to describe it as like describing the whole class?
Yes.
So it's like if you set the amount, if you said that in individual capitalists, the amount that an individual capitalist is able to extract from the workers, the value that they're able to extract will become less and less over time, then that can be used to describe an individual capitalist, but it can't be used to describe the whole of the capitalist class. Because I think I understand that, if so. Because
let's give an example. I got this laptop, and I paid some number of dollars for it. And the store where I got it from, how much profit do they make? Maybe not so much relative to the price of the product, but and it has so many different components, and like there's so much involved in making this single product: mining, transportation, refining, and tech, and just everything. And all these agents, like all these capitalists who are involved in producing this laptop, individually they might not make that much profit off of a single laptop. Let's say $10 out of 1,000. But as a whole, this keeps adding up. So in the end, you'll end up with the capitalist class as a whole will end up drawing $500 profit from this laptop.
So essentially, like this sort of the concept of the fall of the rate of profit like describes how like there will be some individual capitalists that will not be able to keep up with the fall of the rate of profit. So then that will mean that the market will be able to monopolize more and more into the hands of fewer and fewer capitalists.
Yes, like this is a huge inhibition to new business formation, as it always has been.
Yeah,
and
that like
the reason that we have capitalism is because the means of production are so expensive that workers cannot afford them.
Yeah, like when it is that you like describe it, or when it is that like yeah, that's understandable, because that's because you know, like individual like smaller capitalists aren't able to keep up with like the logic of the system and how it is that it works. So the market will get more and more monopolized. So the fall of the rate of profit is sort of like it describes you know how it is that you're saying that you'll have to have more and more capital to be able to even start a business, because the rate of profit will not be, it's just going to get lower and lower.
Or imagine a closed economy, like let's say the Earth as a whole. If there's some alien overlords ruling over us, and they consider the whole Earth as a single business, their accountant is going to look at the accounting sheet and realize that, man, we don't have any capital expenses. We only have expenses for wages and profits, because it's all a single unit. But when you look at the human capitalists and the human accountant, they are going to say, oh man, they're spending so much on this new equipment. I just can't keep up.
And then like the smaller one loses to the bigger one, then the bigger one will be able to absorb the capital that the smaller capitalist loses, and then that'll be like helpful to the monopolizer.
Yes.
All right.
And there are these huge companies, and that mainly, like, companies mainly try to expand through their what's it called, like their supply chain, so that they have to, so that they can do away with sales and all the risk that comes from it, but also so that they are going to have a larger profit rate.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, go on.
Wait. Wait. Keep saying what you're gonna say.
So instead of selling those products, they're gonna be using them, and so that they don't have to inject more capital into their companies to make them work properly. They will just keep trading between themselves, like the way how, I don't know, like third of the global trade is done between like companies that have the same ownership. Those are not actual sales. That's just shifting money and things around.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that we've expanded on the rate of profit to fall in pretty well.
Yeah, and it's probably something we'll cover in the future as well. It's a very in-depth conversation for sure.
Yeah.
Justin, do you have anything more on this quote in
No,
particular?
I think we had a good discussion on it. I think it felt we needed to discuss it because, as you can see, it's a complicated topic.
Yeah, for sure. I believe this is the final slide of our presentation. Does anyone have anything that they want to cover before we wrap up from chapter 4 or 5?
Not me personally.
Yeah, if not, I think continuing at this rate, chapter 6 and 7 is a good grasp. I think those are too long of chapters. We'll meet back up next week after hopefully a win from the Chiefs.
Ooh, go Chiefs.
That's all. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Enjoy the Super Bowl if you're participating in that. Be responsible.
All right, have a good one, everybody.
Have a good Sunday.
Bye, guys.